Okay, hi Mark. Thanks a million for joining me on the podcast and thanks a million for having me over in Newcastle.
No problem at all. Yeah, great to have you. No problem at all.
Before we get into everything, I suppose, of different audiences, different backgrounds, a lot of people play GAA, which is our national sport. So would you mind giving a bit of background on who you are, what you do and how you kind of got to this position?
Yeah, so Marc Steutel, played basketball as a youngster. Fortunate to play through some kind of regional and then northern select teams and under 18s. I was really proud to make the England under 18s team. And then I played high school basketball in America, came back and played National League basketball in the UK. And then I started coaching and I led the Newcastle Eagles' first kind of performance academy at time at college, and we had an academy system there for 7-8 years. Still going to this day, but in terms of launching it. And then started coaching at Northumbria University where I'd played previously, and then have progressed through to now being the Eagles head coach. And at the same time I've coached the Great Britain national team, different levels from England under 16s, England under 18s, Great Britain under 20s, and more recently Great Britain senior men.
Very good. And was for you, when you talk about your playing career, was coaching always something you wanted to go into? You knew from an early age?
Yeah, I think so. I was probably very mouthy as a player and very outspoken as a player. Don't get me wrong, I loved playing. I immersed myself in playing. I was fortunate to have some, really, really positive coaches when I was younger. Two people that were really inspirational were Jimmy McGinn from Ellesmere Port and Bob Martin from East Durham, who was an American guy from Ohio who helped me get to high school out there. And I loved playing. I thought I was a good teammate. I worked exceptionally hard. I thought that I had, a solid IQ on the floor. Maybe what I lacked in, I guess, different areas of my game, I tried to make up for it, in that leadership element. Naturally, I was kind of always one of the leaders of the groups that I played on. And yeah, that kind of transcended into coaching. I think it was pretty much when I was at East Durham, and I'm training 2-3 times a day, and you can imagine at that age between 16 and 18, living away from home, it was expensive. And essentially, I had some different coaches. A gentleman, Greg Modzalewski, who offered me some coaching on this program that he was developing down in Doncaster. So I would essentially coach a day a week, and that would kind of fund my week ahead in terms of living, etc. And I just loved it. I kind of the I guess fulfillment that you get when you're working, particularly at that age. It was primary school. Children I was working with, and I think when you can see the impact that you can have on a young person. Just with giving them a high five, having a laugh and a joke with them, maybe teaching them a new skill or a concept. I just kind of, that fulfillment, I loved it. And at each stage I progressed coaching, fortunate to work with different levels. I think that fulfillment was still there, obviously just probably measured differently. But yeah, I think it was something that naturally I was always going to end up doing.
Something I've discussed a lot with coaches is when they're progressing their journey. You've coached at all levels now. What's the most fun part of the journey? Is it starting out? Is it the middle when you're kind of jumping to kind of the more elite teams, or is it being being the head coach of the GB men's team?
Yeah, great question. I think when you say the most fun part, it's interesting because I think I'm a very aspirational person. And I've worked exceptionally hard to be where I am. And I'm not where I want to be. Yeah, as such, don't get me, in terms of me as a coach, not necessarily my situation, but, I want to improve as a coach daily. I think, coaches always have an approach of, straight away telling a player, you must improve on this, you must improve on that. I believe that coaches should be the same, and, we need to kind of own our own development. But yeah, I think, when I was at Tyne Met Academy, that was like my first real passion project as such, because I'd come through an academy system. I knew what that meant to me, and I don't feel like I worked. I didn't have a job. Yeah, I woke up and I coached basketball every day with young people. So I'd speak to friends of mine who I'd studied with, and they're working office jobs, and I'm literally going to get on the basketball floor for 4-6 hours a day, and it was just amazing. But then I knew that I had the aspiration to progress through levels. So I think I'm somebody who reflects deeply, and I think that I've been very fortunate to be able to reflect at each level. But probably in terms of the most proudest moment was the first time leading my country with the senior men's level. I think that was probably something that was that'll stay with me forever. The job that I'm in right now, whilst we're having a challenging season, it's a job that I've worked towards, and I'm exceptionally proud to be, leading this club in terms of the men's BBL team. And I want to make sure that I and we continue to build upon the good work that's been done here previously, and hopefully, I can help lead us into a new era of success. And I think that's where I'm at. But yeah, I'm definitely had every stop along the way. I think I do try and reflect and realise how fortunate I am to have had a good journey to this point.
When you're working with the Eagles and the senior men's team, are there any kind of non-negotiable or attributes you look for in players aside from their physical ability on the court? Is there any sort of criteria that, we talked yesterday kind of about culture and different players being involved? What do you look for in a player aside from their ability on the court?
Yeah, I think it's definitely nuanced, and it has to be understood in different contexts between the national team and the Eagles team, just because of the nature of what those teams are designed to do and the structure of the competition that they play in. So with the Eagles, I think I wanted to play a brand of basketball where essentially on a Friday night, our 3,000 fans who fill this arena out every week, they leave really happy and really reassured that, the players have committed everything for the club, and obviously we've had, like I say, a challenging season. Our home record better than our away record for sure, but we want to make sure that we're playing up-tempo basketball. I've always been somebody who preaches the defensive side of the ball. Somebody who, like high pick-up points. I think there's a lot of controllable things in basketball and there's a lot of uncontrollable elements of the game. And I think the controllable elements of the game are about your defensive intent, your defensive ability, your application. So I think, essentially a team that defends to run, someone who can be really disruptive, play good, solid man-to-man defense, specific schemes within what we want to do, and then be able to get out and play. On the offensive side, guys who are unselfish and guys who can share the ball. We really try and aspire to have 5-6 guys in double figures every week. Doesn't happen that way, and I think this season is, again, it's had some challenges. But when the ball's moving, I think our team this year is second in the league in assists. Behind half an assist, I think, behind London. So we want to share the ball. We want to play the right way. We want to play with good spacing. And I think the attributes for me are players who are willing to be coached, players who display some mental toughness and some resilience, and can bounce back from adversity and can also pull a group together when you're going through some adversity, which naturally you do throughout the course of a season. And I know people say, but good, hard-working people. I think that speaks volumes to trying to build a team. I think on the group this year we've got Darius Defoe, who's the most winningest player in BBL history. Kyle Johnson, who was playing for GB in the Olympics, and we've also got some rookies at the start of their career. So we've got a blend of people, and I think every single one of them allows themselves to be coached, allows themselves to come in every day and to work hard. And again, regardless of where we're at as a club right now in terms of our league position, they come in and they try and get better every single day. The national team, I think all those concepts are similar, but the process is really exaggerated, really magnified and accelerated, because the windows usually getting together, you've got 2 days practice and you're throwing the ball up. So in that time, it's slightly different. But I think those traits and characteristics I still find important. Okay,
interesting. When you're with a team and you're at this elite level, I suppose in Ireland we don't have many of these. There's only 4 professional clubs in Ireland and it's all rugby. But when you're a full-time coach and this is your job across both teams, what's it like? Does it take away the fun when you're going after those results? Does it kind of take away from the, I coach as well, but it's on my evenings after work and I enjoy getting out in the fresh air and in the football circumstances. But what's it like being a full-time professional coach?
This is a great question. Obviously, this year is, I took a leap of faith and I left my job in education last year. I've had a dual career where I've worked in education. Even when I was at Tyne College and Northumbria University, I was still teaching full-time. So this is the year that I've kind of wanted to take the opportunity, and I felt that I'd worked exceptionally hard for the last 20 so years. So talking with my family actually raised that point and said, you've had your job and you've always coached, but you've always had that, it's something extra that you do. I think for me at that point, if I didn't take that leap of faith where, you know, your job is based on results, I think I would have asked myself, you know, should I have taken that opportunity? So in terms of your specific question, it doesn't take out the fun, or it doesn't change it for me. For me, it's the process of coming in. I mean, everyone talks about the outcome on a Friday evening, and rightly so, and that is what we're based on, and that should be what we're based on, and I'm not shying away from that. But the fun and the enjoyment and the fulfillment for me is, you know, getting up on a Monday and you know, having a really detailed plan of the week ahead and what we need to cover and how we need to cover it, and trying to get, you know, a group of people to buy into your ideas and your concepts, go and try and apply them on a Friday night. Hopefully you get the outcome that you want. That's really fulfilling. But as you say, you get that on the Friday night, you're already looking forward to the next one, because the season is relentless. But no, I still, the things that I still enjoy in coaching, you know, still seeing players progress and players move on, and the relationships that you have with players, they're the things that I really kind of hold dear to me. And even though, you know, I'm fortunate to have moved up levels, I think it's those moments that I still cherish.
Okay, interesting. I'm a type of person that I need to have multiple different outlets, like work is an outlet from this and from coaching and vice versa. But how do you switch off? Or is it just this constant go, you know, even when you're at home, are you always thinking about basketball and coaching?
Yeah, I think that is the challenge of coaching, you know, and that's, I think in lockdown it was interesting because, you know, the British basketball community and, you know, a lot of the coaches, we kind of got together, you know, via Zoom, of course. I think after we exhausted all the Zoom quizzes that you could do with friends and family, we got together and, you know, kind of really shared. You know, we did a lot of discussions around technical, tactical. But I think one of my, I guess, areas of focus is exactly what you'd said. You know, people talk about in coaching, you know, you've got to be connected. You've got to have a network of coaches. You've got to recruit. To do that, when you're not on the floor for 2-3 hours a day, you're probably on your phone or on the computer, or, you know, you're trying to build relationships and networking. It's relentless. It is 24/7. That's all I've ever known work-wise anyway. So for me, it hasn't really changed. But I do try and find a way to get some balance. You know, even if it's getting out in the fresh air and going for some walk. We live in a beautiful part of the world, you know, and I love kind of getting outdoors and getting out getting to the coast, or getting up into Northumberland and getting up in the hills. But that for me that is the biggest challenge of the job. In particular, you know, this year we've had a few disappointments in terms of results. You carry that with you, you know, and until you can kind of get back on the floor and try and move forward and fix it, you carry that with you. So yeah, that's, don't get me wrong, you know, I wouldn't change it in a heartbeat. I love my job. I love what I do on a day-to-day. But I think the most challenging part is absolutely trying to get that balance and being able to switch off and be present where you are when you're not a coach, I think. Yeah,
completely. And it's interesting, I always enjoy chatting to coaches that have playing experience, and it's like, when you start coaching, was there any sort of misconception, or you were like, do you know, this kind of, you know, when we're players, we've a certain, you know, thoughts about what coaches do and what, you know, maybe sometimes they've some sort of agenda behind what they do. Is there any sort of misconception you learned, whether it was through playing when you got involved in coaching, or you'd like to share with other people who don't coach and give them that bit of an insight into what's it like being a head coach?
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point again. I think when I first started, I was probably a lot more stubborn and pig-headed, I think, than I am now. Because I think when you're a player, you probably have an idea of, like, I know I did, you know, I was very assured with, this is what we should be doing, this is what I believe in. And I think, you know, I'm fortunate to have learned and have grown and developed a lot over the years. And I think at times that gives you probably a more rounded viewpoint, a more holistic viewpoint, when, you know, sometimes, particularly the pace of basketball, the pace of our game, and I'm sure it's the same in other sports, but the pace of our game and how dynamic it is, I think you'll make a split-second decision, and you'll make that decision for the right reason for the team, but somebody might not be able to, one of your athletes might not be able to see that in the moment. Yeah. And I think it's probably just being able to manage, particularly for me at senior men's and elite level, it's managing a lot of those perceptions, a lot of those ideas, and trying to get everybody on the same page. I think, you know, you'd said that misconception were different ideas. I always talk a lot about perception, you know, what do players see, what do players hear, and how explicit can we be with our communication as coaches to really ensure that I don't know, the vision is articulated, and the accountability always comes back to that vision. Yeah. And I think if you do that, even if there's some bumps along the road, you're probably going in the right direction. But yeah, I think the biggest things for me making that transition from playing to coaching is that holistic viewpoint. You know, as a player, regardless of what you think, you know, even as a captain, as a, you know, someone on the team, you're seeing it through your lens, and that's it. Yeah. Whereas when you're the coach, you know, you're managing 15 different relationships, you're managing the team, you're managing in a professional environment, you know, you're managing other factors off the floor, you know, different support services, different systems. You're managing everything to try and build a program. And sometimes you've got to make really tough decisions to be able to kind of lead the group where you want them to get to. And some players that might you know, disgruntle some players on the way. So I think it's just about having that holistic viewpoint. And I think the biggest thing that I would say is you've got to figure out early on what your core values are and stay true to those core values. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, talk about coaching philosophy and they write paragraphs, you know, and it sounds really intelligent and articulate. For me, it's about empathy, honesty and authenticity. You know, authenticity, be who you are, because if you try and manipulate who you are, players will just see through it straight away. So be exactly who you are and stay true to that. Empathy, you know, can you think about what the world's like walking a mile in someone else's shoes? You know, and at times, like in a basketball standpoint, that could be a player who has been a starter all their life and you're asking them to come off the bench. Could be a player who's struggling for rhythm and form and confidence. Could be a player that you're asking to do a different role. It actually could be the person beyond the player who's going through some family troubles at home, you know, life stresses, relationship stresses, that one, and honesty. Of course, everybody says it, but it's about being able to have those honest conversations where if it's not good enough, you tell somebody it's not good enough as to why it's not good enough, and you're able to move on. So I think they're the three things that I absolutely try and stay true to on a day-to-day. And I think if I do that, do I make mistakes along the way? Absolutely. But if I stay true to those three things, then, you know, I'm really assured that I'm going in the right direction.
Brilliant. I love them. I love those particular 3 ones as well. I'm interested in as well when you're learning, and you said when you're professional development as a coach, and this is why I'm here to learn from you guys. But I know it was the plan as well from movement coaches. I know the guys over there, but who do you learn from? Who do you have any specific mentors you look to and you reach out to?
Yeah, again, I've been really fortunate, I think, to have a lot of people who've absolutely influenced me. So, you know, for 15 years coaching here in the Northeast, whether I was coaching the academy or the Division 1 programme, I worked closely with Fab, who was obviously heading up the BBL team. We would, you know, we'd practice 6 till 8, they'd practice 8 till 10, sometimes we'd flip it. I'd always stay for Fab sessions. Fab was just he is an exceptional person, but he would also come in early and literally just, you know, critique a couple of things. So that I always found that exceptionally helpful. I've done a lot of coach development courses where it was, you know, really fortunate to be around some high-level European coaches, Pablo Lasso, Pesic, Janis Dravic, some other people. But I think just for me, I was able to build some relationships, strangely enough, with coaches in the same league. And, you know, it's funny enough, you're in the car at the same time, right? So, like, you finish practice and you're driving, or you finish a game and you're driving. And apart from the week that I would play that certain coach, you know, we would literally talk a lot, and you talk through the challenges that you're going through, and to have somebody in the same situation that you're competing against, but really be aligned with getting better, I found that important. And then, yeah, on the national team, you know, I've had a lot of mentors. I worked with a coach, Alberto Lorenzo, that I found really impactful, a Spanish coach with the Estudiantes, just in terms of his vision and how he's able to, I guess, adapt and manipulate situations in real time, you know, tactically, how he was able to plan effective sessions at that level, what it takes at that level to, you know, to kind of get the most out of. You've got 2 practice sessions before you're playing against Germany, you know, with a complete group that you pull it, like, how can you get them to where you need to get them to? What is the most important things to cover? What are the things that are nice to cover? You know, trying to get that balance right. So, yeah, I'm fortunate where I've had a lot of people. I actually have another gentleman called John Ireland, who, funny turn of events, I coached his son at Northumbria for 4 years. They're a British German family. I'm from Runcorn originally, and the other side of Runcorn is a town called Widnes. And again, funny enough, he's from Widnes. We didn't know each other until I was coaching his son. And he's like a performance coach, works with a lot of businesses, CEOs. So he works in that world a lot. And he just, even his message this week a few times, always just checking in about how I am, how I'm doing, different decisions. And whilst, he hasn't got the specific basketball context, he's aware of it. It's just nice to have somebody else who I can, bounce ideas off. And, even today I've got a phone call with another gentleman called Ed Hall, who works at Northumbria University, who's like a coach developer, just to talk through some different ideas. So I am fortunate in that sense where I've got a lot of people who I can bounce ideas off in different settings. And I think that's important for any aspiring coaches. I think the other thing about coaches is we generally want to give back or feed forward, however we generally want to do that. So for the younger coaches, you've got to try and find a mentor, somebody who can help you out, where you can have a critical friend.
Yeah, brilliant. I love the way you speaking about kind of what I'm trying to take away is what we can use in Ireland, and we're probably a smaller sport in Ireland even than here, because we've Gaelic football, rugby is obviously massive at the moment, going for the Grand Slam tomorrow. But when you're going into you've mentioned there Germany, you're going into the Eurobasket when you're the underdog, and when you don't maybe have you don't have the financial backing of other countries, and that's just the way it is. How do you get the guys do you buy into the underdog mentality? How do you get that when you've 2 days before you play Germany? How do you manage it?
Yeah, I was, again, I say this a lot, but I am exceptionally fortunate that the group that I inherited with the national, so I was an assistant coach with the team for a couple of years, so I'd had some, like a foundation of relationships with the players, but it's completely different in that role to being the head coach. The players in that cycle were just exceptional in terms of how they bought in, their vision, their commitment, and they understood it was about building a team. So I really, was purposeful with my communication interactions on us being the underdog, and how anybody outside of our group, you're irrelevant to us. We respect the opposition for sure, but we wanted to go in and, if we lose the game because we've been, outplayed essentially, not because we haven't left everything that we can out there on the floor. And I think, as you alluded to before, in elite basketball, in professional basketball, a lot of these players are based upon their numbers. They have people judging them from around the world, looking at their statistics. Can they help their team next year? On the national team, don't get me wrong, if players do well, it can help their career. But it's pure. It's probably the most pure basketball that senior men can have from when they were playing as kids. So I absolutely tried to harness an underdog mentality. I leaned on a lot of the senior guys in doing that, and I was, again, really, really proud of that culture and that environment that we built. And I think we actually played Montenegro away, tough environment, lost the game. And after the game, I'd said to the guys, GB is past being a moral victory and a nearly team. We have to go and do it, and we have to do it in 2 days in Newcastle against Germany. And the guys, the way they played in that game, we were down in the game. They were just really resilient, really together, and played exceptionally hard. And I think that first win gave us a bit of momentum. We had a 20-point loss to France. It was a bad loss, really bad loss. And we came back 2 days later against Montenegro, and we beat them, but we beat them with the head-to-head, which was also huge. So, and as we're talking about being an underdog, we wanted to make sure that we were an underdog who controls what we can, not we were an underdog, where we start looking at like a victim mentality, where we start blaming other people for different situations. So yeah, I think that's something that we have to have. I would like it where we still have that mentality, but the program is resourced and administered and run effectively, because these players just have my admiration for what they do for the national team. Players who put their body through extra wear and tear in the middle of the season. They leave their clubs when a lot of their clubs in the windows are saying, look, practice for a day or two, but have 3-4 days off, rest and recover your body. Whereas these players come and they go and leave it all for Great Britain. So yeah, I'm really, really a lot of respect and admiration for them. That underdog mentality, I think, is a part of being a British basketball player, because whilst we come from a country that has high quality of living from a basketball standpoint, a lot of the players that get to that senior men's level have had to go through adversity. And I think that was something that I was able to articulate and I was able to understand because, okay, not to the same level as a player, nowhere near, but I've been through that journey. So I think I was able to build those relationships and connect with the players and understand the journey that they've been through to get there and what it means to represent the national team. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of as a national team coach is I'm really confident that when you watch the teams play that I've been fortunate to lead, they display those traits. They display those traits of, playing hard, playing together, and actually playing for the jersey.
I'm very conscious of time. I just want to ask you, one of my favourite questions is, across all sports and coaches, is what separates the elite players and the best players from the rest of the competition? Where is that, whether you're coaching them, when you watch them, when you're playing against them, what has been kind of the pattern or the different traits you see in those elite players from kind of that just are one step ahead of everyone else?
Great question. I'll try and give you two things. I think the first thing that springs to mind across maybe all sports, maybe a little bit more generic across elite level sports, is the mentality side, the psychological side. Players' career is just filled with bumps, adversity, challenges, injury, lack of rhythm, lack of confidence. I don't know, stick from the fans. They're people first. People make mistakes in life, as opposed to players. So I think pressure, how they can deal with pressure in those moments. I think the elite of the elite psychologically find a way to be present, find a way to be in the moment, find a way to feel prepared mentally for those moments. And when they arise, they're able to grasp them two hands. So I think the psychological standpoint, people say not getting too high, not getting too low. How do you actually deal with, in a game, in a hostile situation, you're down 9, you haven't shot the ball well. Have you got the mental resilience to go and impact the game in a different way? I think that's the first thing that stands to mind. And the second thing that stands to mind is it's like the iceberg model. We probably see the tip of the iceberg, the performance. Underneath that, it's the professionalism and the approach. And again, I'm fortunate to have worked, and seen a lot of players. Somebody who stands to mind for me is Gabe Olaseni, who, I got the chance to see him at the start of his career in the first national team window I was in. He's in the gym, goes through his pre-practice routine religiously with meticulous detail, practices the right way, listens intently, extremely coachable, goes through practice, goes through his post-practice routine, his nutrition, his sleep, his recovery. It's everything that really we see that elite level performance, the tip of the iceberg. It's the professionalism and the approach that goes underneath that. Hard work, commitment, durability, all of those things. So I'd say for sure it's the psychological, the mental side. I'd say the first kind of separator, and the second separator for me would be the professionalism, the approach, the routine. Is it something that you live and breathe 24/7? Players have a career of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 years, somewhere usually in that region. And have you maximised every single second in that moment to try and get the best outputs that you can?
Brilliant. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I don't want to lay your shit around. I finish every episode with the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. I haven't given you a heads up. I try to give the guests a heads up, so this is completely off the cuff. Okay. I'm going to start off with question 1. Mark, what is your favourite quote?
Favourite quote? I probably have different ones at different times. Normality is a paved path. It's comfortable to walk, but no flowers grow.
Right, who was that?
Van Gogh.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Question 2, what's the best sporting event you've been to? And you can pick maybe one as a fan or one as a coach.
Best sporting event I've been to. As a fan, I'm going bucket list stuff. I took my son to Wembley last year and we watched Liverpool win the FA Cup final against Chelsea. Obviously being based in the northeast, I've tried to put my northwest roots into my son. So he's 7, he wears his Liverpool shirt loud and proud. But yeah, it was just a special day. Got the train down, sun was out, like bucket list kind of day. So as a fan, that would be it. As a coach, Eurobasket was, whilst it left a sour taste in our mouths because the performances, I don't feel we were put in a position to succeed. But the actual event of being there at that level and trying to come up with, game plans against Giannis and, scheming against different level of players. That was positive.
I'm going to throw in a curveball. It's not a question, but if I could give you the key to go in and watch any team in the world, like I've just come in this week, who would it be and why? And it doesn't have to be basketball. If you've a different coach from a different sport you admire.
I think at the minute, I'd probably go with a Tudis at Fenerbahce, just because I think the way that they play and how meticulous they are, I'd love to see his processes throughout the week and how he got there. Obviously done a great job with the Greek national team as well, but I'd like to go and see him on a club level and see how he his processes essentially.
Very good. Question 3: what's been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
So I guess one that springs to mind. I'm not sure if it's exactly. I mean, okay, this season has been extremely challenging. In terms of dealing with some adversity. Player injuries. We had some recruitment challenges where we thought players were coming and then didn't last minute. And obviously dealing with them with some changes in the roster and trying to keep the group together. So I'd say as a whole this season has probably been one of the most challenging seasons that I've had, and I think it's about, again, what I said before, staying true to who you are and trying to understand where we are and how we can build upon that. I think when Northumbria University had a change in the Vice-Chancellor and they took all of the funding away from the National League teams, bearing in mind at that point, we'd won the Bucks programme not too long before, we'd just won Division 1, we'd just won the National Cup. I felt that we were building a legacy, a programme there for young British guys to come in and play. It took a while, and I wanted to continue to coach. And I actually, in the area, the only opportunity that was, without me leaving the area, that was available was with Teesside Lions, stepping down to Division 3. And at that point, I'd obviously coached Division 1 for many years, national team coach. But I think, being humble enough to step down and say it's still a coaching opportunity, good club, good programme, ran by good people. And I think, being able to just continue to get on the floor and say, okay, the level isn't where I want to be coaching, and that's no disrespect to anybody, but just having that resilience to be able to commit to a season, travelling, all that type of stuff. Probably those two things stand to mind. Okay,
question 4: what's been your biggest achievement on or off the court?
Off the court, being a dad, no question. My son is, I'm of course biased, but he's an exceptional young man. He's polite, well mannered, works hard, good in school. I think being a dad is the first thing, and hopefully that always will be. That's probably what I pride most in my life. And on the court, I would say, the first piece of silverware with Northumbria was because I put my life into that programme for 8-9 years. So the first piece of silverware was really, really emotional, and we won the National Cup final against a good Southampton team, and beating Germany on the buzzer in the Eurobasket qualification, when again the game had ups and downs in it, which ultimately that win meant that we were going to Eurobasket. I think that was special.
Brilliant. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Great question. Buy property. Buy a lot of property back then. I think when it was easier to buy. No, I think at 18 years old, embrace every opportunity that you get. And I know it's easy to say that, but I know I've done that. I look back on it again and say, I'm extremely confident and comfortable where I am in my life. At 18 years old, 19 years old, was I a little bit awkward at times, maybe in different situations, potentially. So I just think, maybe embrace every opportunity, personal, professional, has some learning underneath it. I think embrace every opportunity, and you can get something out of every opportunity that you have. Embrace every opportunity.
Brilliant. Question 6: who would be your dream dinner guest and why?
Great question. I think just because he's announced his retirement, I'd love to pick either Greg Popovich's brains. I actually like watching a lot of Doc Rivers stuff too, But I think Greg Popovich. I think I'd like to just sit down with him and pick his brains.
Very good. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
That is a great question.
That's not my question. I've robbed it from another podcast. But go for it.
If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called? So I'm hopeful. Let's see. This would be chapter 5 in my book. Okay, so hopefully there's a few chapters left, and this one would be called The Bumpy Road. Yeah. Okay. I think where we are at this point now in the season, it's obviously had some challenges, but I am, hopeful and confident, and I'm assured in myself that this will be something that, myself, the club, we look back on in a few years' time and say, we had some challenges then, but we stayed the course and we managed to turn it around.
Brilliant. Well, Marc, thanks a million for jumping on the podcast. You're about to go to shoot around, and best luck tonight and the rest of the season, and I'm looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.